Janie here again. Can't quite believe where the weeks are going, and that I'm here with a message to say that the patterns for set 4 of the Fruit Garden Crochet Along are now live on the Stylecraft website, so you can head over there and get them now. They're in UK, US and Dutch language, and this time they focus on a motif called Purple Aster, which I'm holding here, and it's quite a straightforward block. And you will cover things again that you did when you made the clementine motif last time. You need to make 4 of these. I've done a little video that shows you how to work some of the little bits inside this motif, so you might want to stick with me and have a little look at that over the next half an hour or so. And I've also talked you through how to work onto your Acanthus motif. You're going to do 3 or 4 more rounds onto this one, and one of the things I've talked about is how you can write yourself almost like a crochet shorthand that will hopefully help you through the more complicated little bits of the Acanthus, and you need to make 8 of those. So I hope you're all having fun with the crochet along. I keep saying it, but I really love seeing all your pictures popping up on social media, on Instagram and on Facebook, and keep it coming, and I hope you're enjoying it. I also wanted to say, please head over to the Janie Crow website, janiecrow.com, and sign up to my newsletter. I do it every couple of weeks, and I talk about all the other stuff I'm up to as well, and post some pictures of what you guys have sent me as well. So I'd really love it if you headed over there and signed up to the newsletter. And in the meantime, I hope you're all well and that you're staying safe, and I'll see you back here in a couple of weeks' time with the next set of patterns. I'm going to start by talking you through a couple of little bits I think you might find helpful on the Aster, the Purple Aster motif. One is where you do a stitch 2 rows down. You do a double crochet stitch a couple of rows down to get this kind of petal that works over the top of what you've done already. So I'm going to show you how to do that, because you're going to work over the top of a previous round to do that. And then I'm also going to show you just one of the things about this background framework that you do in a few rows time, because there's something different that happens at the end of the round. So I'm going to show you that as well. I'm going to show you using this colourway, recipe 1. I'm going to work this round, which is done using rows first. If you're doing recipe 2, then it would be rows as well. It's this same pinky colour. And then, as I say, I'm going to show you this framework at the back here. A lot of the other bits that are used in this piece are things that you've done already in the clementine motif. So like the leaf, for example, is made in the same way, very similar way to what you've done already. And there's picos in here which you've done already as well. You did those when you started your Acanthus motif. So I'm going to just do those quickly, those first 2 things on this motif, and then I'm going to move on to your next rounds on the Acanthus motif. So this is my Purple Aster motif. I've worked 3 rounds, so I've done to the end of round 3. I've done the foundation round, then round 1, which is 2 stitches into each stitch, then round 2, which is the round done in the minty shade. I think that's called mint or seafoam, depending on which recipe you're doing. And then I've also done round 4, which is the round where I've worked 2 stitches into one stitch, 2 into the next, and done a chain space between and skipped a stitch. So what I've done on that round is I've worked a double crochet and a half treble into one stitch, and then a half treble and a double into the next stitch. Then I've done 1 chain and skipped a stitch, and then I've repeated that the whole way round. So what we're looking for are these skipped stitches that were made here on round 3 in the mint shade. And what I'm going to do, I'm using a 4mm hook. If you're doing recipe 2, you'll be using a 3.5. But what I'm going to do is put my hook all the way through that skipped stitch that was made on round 3. So you should be able to find the top of it there, and you're not coming through it and staying at the front. you're actually going all the way through to the back there. Then I'm going to pick up my rose colour, and it's rose on both recipes. So I'm going to pick up rose and just draw that yarn through to the front of the work and do 1 chain. And that just joins my yarn in. I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same skip stitch, sorry, and complete a double. And that's just got me joined in. So I'm going to pull that tail out. Okay, and what I've done is I've worked over the top. When the pattern says working over the top, what it means by that is that you've worked over round 3, which is your cranberry round, or umber if you're doing the second colour, so that you've captured the back of that chain, well, not the back of that chain, the whole of that chain into your stitch. So then I'm going to do 4 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm looking for the next skip stitch, so you can see it quite clearly, it's that one there. I'm going to go through that skip stitch and over the top, so I'm working over the top of the chain that I made on the previous round. And I'm going to do that the whole way round. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, skip those 4 stitches, find that next missed stitch and work over the top of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, skip those 4 stitches, find that next missed stitch and do a double crochet. That's US single over the top, and you're going to do that the whole way round. This is what the motif looks like at the end of round 4. So you've created, or I've created, these chain spaces with a double in between all the way round, and they just sit behind that previous round or over the top of that previous round. When you look at the reverse of the work, what you've done is you've caught in the chain that was made on round 3 as well, so you can see a clear stitch there at the back and at the front, and you'll see that I've actually sewn my ends in at that point as well. So what you're going to do next on the next round, I'll just show you this first little bit, is you're going to slip stitch into the next chain space. Then you're going to do 1 chain, and then you're going to do 5 double crochet, that's 5 single crochet if you're US terms, into that chain space. That's 3, 4, 5, like that. So you're not building up a lot of height on that, you're just doing 5 doubles into that chain space. Then you're doing 1 chain, and then you're going to do 5 into the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 double, and you're going to do that the whole way round until you've filled up those chain spaces that you made on round 4. I've just started round 6, and I think there's something that might be quite a nice little thing to show you. I wasn't going to show you this round because I thought it just repeated what you've done before, but there's just one little thing in this round that you might stumble across that confuses you slightly. And what it is, it's just making sure that you find the top of that first double stitch of the 5 group that you made into the chain space, because what can happen is that you can cover it up by working into the chain space beforehand. You can cover it up. So just wanted to show you how to make sure you've got it. What I've done here then is I've started by working into the chain space and done 1 double crochet. Then I've done a double into the next stitch and made a picot. Then it's a double into each of the next 2, make a picot, 1 double into the same stitch and then 1 into the next stitch, make a picot, 1 double into the next stitch and 1 double into the chain space that you made before. And this is the point at which you might miss that first stitch. So I've done my stitch into the chain space, and then I must make sure that I find the very top of that first double, otherwise it's going to throw my stitch count. So I've done that first one, I make 3 chain and then make my picot by working into the base of that chain. Then I'm doing 1 double into the next stitch and 1 double into the next stitch. Then I'm doing the 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, slip stitch at the base to make the picot, and then here I'm going into the same stitch again and the next stitch Then I'm doing 3 chain. This is my final one of the 3 picots on that little bit. Picot there, and then 1 double into the last one. And that's my usage of those 5 stitches. And because now I'm at the chain space again. So just make sure, my point here really is to just make sure that you're finding that very first stitch of the 5 group. Here's my motif at the end of round 6, and I've just made sure that I've got the right number of picots. You should have 3 per petal, so a total of 24. It's always worth double checking that you've got that right before you fasten off and sew your ends in. I speak from experience because I've done that so many times. In fact, when I was making this one, I did forget one of the picots, so just check before you finish that you've definitely done all 3 picots on every petal. And now I'm going to show you the next round, which is round 7. There's not a massive amount to show you on this round. Again, it's not huge, but there's something that happens at the end of round 7 that I just want to show you, and it affects what happens at the beginning of round 8 as well. So I'm going to show you that. Just make sure that you've measured at this, you should have measured earlier on actually at the point down here. So just make sure that you're working to the right tension before you go too far. Okay, so I'm going to be using graphite, which is the grey in recipe 1. If you're in recipe 2, then you'll be using the dark blue. And I'm going to look for, again, for the skipped stitches that were made previously. And this time I'm looking for the top of that double crochet that was made on the pink round, the rose round down here. I'm going to push my leaf. Now I must say this, I always get my leaves and petals muddled up. I did it massively in the last video, so just if I say leaf but it looks like a petal, then just ignore me. I'm sure you'll get the gist of what I'm saying anyway. So I'm going to push that petal forward, that bit of crochet, I'm going to push it forward, and I'm going to find this skipped stitch here. This is what I'm looking for here. So I'm going to push that forward and put my hook into the top of that skipped stitch that was made previously, and I'm just going to join my yarn into there by making 1 chain, and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same stitch and pull my tail through, and that just gets me so that I'm joined in. So you might see that very slightly at the front there, but you can see I'm just at the top of that skipped stitch. So then I'm going to work 5 chain, so these are kind of working behind what you've made before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to find the next skip stitch, which for me is there. Just push my work forward and find, I'm using my sort of hook part of the hook to find the top of that next skip stitch. I'm going to do that the whole way around, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, identify the stitch which for me is there, and then push that work forward and find that skipped stitch there and do a double. So you can do that the whole way round, but you're not going to do that on the very final space, chain space. So I'm going to work round and I'll show you that in a sec. I'm just coming up to the end of round 7. And if you look at the reverse of my work, let's just get that tail out of the way, I've made 7 of the chain spaces and I need to make 8, so I'm about to do the last chain space. The previous chain spaces have been 5 chain, 1 double crochet all the way round. So this one's a bit different in that in order for the hook to be at the right position, what I've done here is said to do 2 chain, 1, 2, and then instead of doing 3 more chain, you're actually going to do a treble into the first stitch, and that will represent those last few chain of that chain space. So I've done a treble to finish there, and that is then the equivalent of a 5 chain space. But what it's done is it's left my hook at the center point behind that petal, so that my my leaves and everything that are made over the next few rounds actually sit in the right positions. So I'm going to show you that again. When you get to that last chain space, instead of doing 5 chain, you're going to do 2 chain, 1, 2, and then a treble, that's a US double, into the first stitch at the beginning of the round, and that is the equivalent of my final chain space. What I'm then going to do is do at the beginning of round 8, I do 1 chain to get me to the height of the round, and then the double, the first double of that round, is worked into this equivalent of a chain space. So I'm going to put my hook right below where I am and do my first double crochet into there, and that then sets me on the right path for this next round. So I'm going to just make the chain stem, the leaf stem. I'm going to make the leaf stem, and then I'm going to move on to the Acanthus motif, because I think everything else in this motif is very similar to what you've done before, but I'll just do a quick reminder of how you make that leaf stem. So I've done my 1 double crochet at the base there. I'm going to do 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oh, 6. Just make sure I don't over pull that last chain, and then I'm going to do 5 DC, that's 5 single crochet if you're in US terms, back along that chain. So it's 1 double crochet into every chain. So I've done 2, 3, 4 and 5. There we go, that's my working back along the 6th chain. I'm going to skip, oh sorry, I'm going to do 1 double crochet into the same chain space at the base there, like that. That finishes off my stem. Then I'm going to do 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, 1 double crochet into the next chain space. Oh, I've just gone over the tail then as well. Let's just move that tail out of the way. So it's 1 double crochet into the next chain space, 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and 1 double crochet into the next chain space. I'm going to show you round 7 on the Acanthus motif. It's pretty straightforward, but I'm just going to show you your starting point so that you can make sure you're in the right position. You're going to start by flipping the little leaf. It is a leaf this time. You're going to flip the little leaf forward and look for those 3 stitches that were made on the previous round using that dark blue shade, in my case on recipe 1, and you're going to find the central stitch of those 3, which for me is that one there, and join your yarn into that stitch. And I'm in mint, the shade that's called mint, and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same stitch, and that just gets me joined in as usual. I've got a slightly short tail there. I'd usually leave a slightly longer tail than that, but that's alright for this demonstration. And then what I'm going to do then, so that's me joined in behind the leaf. Don't forget you will have pushed your leaves through on the previous rounds. You're going to do 8 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you're going to find the chain space behind that next picot. So you're going to push the picot forwards, find that chain space and do a double crochet into there. So that gives us the first chain space. Then you're going to do 8 chain again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you're going to find that third stitch, sorry, the central stitch of the 3 behind that little leaf, like that. And you're going to do that the whole way round, so that you will have made 8 chain spaces. At the end of round 7, I've created 8 new chain spaces around the outside of this motif, and I'm going to slip stitch into that next chain space, and then I'm going to fill this chain space up with 11 stitches, 11 DC stitches. So 1 chain to get me to the height, 11 stitches into here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm about halfway, so I'm just going to check that my stitches are pushed round that chain space. So that was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. Then I'm going to do 1 chain, and then I'm going to do another 11 into that next chain space. So you're going to do that the whole way round. You're going to do 11 DC, that's US single, 1 chain and 11 into the next, and you're going to do that all the way round to the end. So this is the motif at the end of round 8, and you'll see that by putting the 11 stitches into each of the chain spaces, it really opens up that last round and starts to build the framework of the piece. Don't forget to do your last chain, because I've just done it. I just forgot that last chain. Just make sure you remember that one before you do your slip stitch. And what you're going to do at this point is you're going to mark some stitches. And for the Acanthus motif, it's really important that you do place your markers where I tell you to, because it will just make life so much easier later on if you've put your markers in. And in this case, the stitches that we're going to put the markers into, are these stitches that you made on round 7 that were skipped on round 8. And you're going to put the marker in at the back. So I find it easier to identify the stitch first. So it's that one there, and then turn it round and put my stitch marker into there. And I use these locking stitch markers because I think they're far safer than just putting pins and things in. So you can do that the whole way round. You're going to find all these, there's another one here, all the skipped stitches from that previous round. So they're all the mint stitches that have been skipped, and put a marker into every one of them. So I'm at the beginning of round 9, and in all honesty this is quite a lot to cope with this round, but if you break it up into pieces and if you understand what you're doing in advance of doing it, then hopefully it will make it easier. So what I thought I'd do is just explain to you what you're going to do on this round. You're going to create some leaf stems. You're going to create 3 this side of the motif and 3 this side, and you're going to make them so that one lines up with all of the little thin leaves that you've previously made, and the central one of the 3 will also line up with that picot there at that side. So you'll have a leaf stem here, a leaf stem here, and a leaf stem in line with that one there. Then you won't have one at this point. Then you'll have another one here in line with this one, here in line with this one, and here in line with this one, but not one in line with that cluster. So the temptation is to make a leaf stem at every point, but you'd end up with 8 and not 6. So I'm just going to talk you through the round, and if I break off at any point it's because I just feel like it needs to be put in bite-sized pieces, so just bear with me. Let's see how we get on. It might be that I need to do this in a couple of takes. So the first thing you're going to do is find the central stitch of the 5 stitch group that were made down here on round, I think that's round 6, and you're going to find the third one of those 5, and you're going to do it by pushing that chain space forward and just finding that third stitch of the 5 there, and you're going to join the yarn in, do 1 chain and do a double into that same stitch just to get you going. So you're in, and I'm going to pull my tail out there, and I'm in. Okay, so now I'm at the point, I'm just before that cluster there, and that's not going to have a leaf stem on it, the first one. So we're just going to do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the centre of the picot that's there and into the corresponding chain space. So I'm going to use my kind of hook part of the hook to find the centre of the picot, and make sure you've got the true centre and not just a chain, and the corresponding chain stitch space, sorry. So I've got the 2 there, and then I'm going to draw the yarn through and do 1 double crochet into there. And what that's done is it's created a chain behind there, but it's pulled the picot, it's pulled the petal up to correspond with that double crochet. So then I'm going to do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and working behind that chain space there, I'm going to find the central stitch of those 5 that were made down in the blue and do a double into there. Okay, then I'm going to do 5 chain again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this time I'm actually looking for the skipped chain at the top of this thin leaf that we made previously. So I'm going to use my hook to find that skipped chain like that and find the corresponding chain space. So we're not going into the marked stitches, they're going to be used later on. We're going into the chain spaces. So I'm going to go into there and catch through. Do 1 double crochet. Okay, now because I'm at the top of a cranberry thin leaf here, I'm going to make another leaf stem. I'm going to make the first leaf stem. So it's 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm working back along that leaf stem. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So I've made my first little leaf stem. Then I'm going to do a slip stitch into that stitch at the base there. That's different to what you've done before. It just finishes off the stem really nicely. You didn't do a slip stitch when you did your clementine motifs. Then I'm going to do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to find the central stitch of the next 5 group made on round 6, like that. We go. Then it's 5 chain again, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I'm going to find that picot. So I'm going to find centre of the picot again, if you want to use your hook part of the hook to find it, and the corresponding chain space. So you've got the 2 together, draw that through, do your double crochet, and then that's the point at which I'm ready to make another leaf stem. So I've made the second leaf stem of the 3, and I'm just about to head along to the next one. So I'm just doing again, I've done the slip stitch at the bottom there, so I'm doing 5 chain, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to find that central stitch of the 5 group there. Oh, I've just missed it there. That's what comes of, what I should really do is push that forward so I can, oh, and I've dropped that now as well. I'm going to find the central one of that 5. Do another 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the final one of these 3 leaf stems, I'm going to find the skipped chain at the top of that little leaf. It could be a bit tight by now actually, mine's a little bit tight, so just use your hook to open up that skipped chain, find the corresponding chain space there, and make the final leaf stem. So can you see I've got 2 already, and I'm going to make the final one of the 3 group at this point. So I'm at the base of my 3rd stem of the 3 stem group, and I'm going to do 5 chain, and then do 1 double crochet into the 3rd stitch of the 5 on round 6, and that gets me to the halfway point. I'm now halfway round my motif. So here I don't have a petal, a leaf stem rather, but here, here and here 3 times I've got my leaf stems. So I'm going to do the same repeat again now. So I'm going to do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to pull up that picot. This is the one that does not have a leaf stem on it. So I'm just going to pull up the picot, find the corresponding chain space and do a double. Do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 double crochet, push that forward, 1 double crochet into the third of the 5 at the back there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and because I'm now in line with the top of a little leaf that was previously made, I'm going to make another leaf stem. So I'm going to find that skipped chain at the top there, find the corresponding chain space and come through both, and then I'm going to make the first of my 3 leaf stems so that it's an exact mirror of what I've done over here, and I'll show you that when I get to the end of the round. So I hope that's helped you understand where you're making those leaf stems. You're not going to have one at 2 opposite points centrally there on the flower, but you're going to have 3 at each side. This is what the motif looks like at the end of round 9. I've left my tail ends in here because they're not easy to sew in at that point where you've got quite a lot of chain, but you're making sure you've got 3 stems at one side and 3 stems at the other side, and that you've got this framework going on behind the motif. If you look at it from the back, you'll see it quite clearly, and don't worry if your leaf stems are curling at this point, that's what they like to do. Your stitch markers are going to be left in for later on. You're going to use these stitches later. Obviously if you've got 8 stitch markers in each motif, then you're going to use a lot of stitch markers. What you might want to do is actually put little knots of yarn in here. Just use your bits you've snipped away previously and just tie bits of yarn in, because otherwise you're going to need about, what would that be, 60, 70 stitch markers. So you can always add in a bit of yarn if you want to, but as I said before, they are really important that you do leave those in for later on. Okay, so we're in the home straight now, we're nearly there. I'm now going to show you how to work the leaves, and you're going to make a rounded leaf at the first point, on the first of the 3. Then you're going to make a slightly different leaf on the central one, and then you're going to make a rounded one again. Those are very similar to what you've done on the clementine motif on that final one. So these 2 will be the same and this one will be different, and then the opposite will happen over here. Well, not the opposite will happen, the same will happen over here. You'll have a rounded leaf, a pointed leaf and a rounded leaf at that side as well. For round 10 you're going to start in the chain space before that first stem. So I'm just going to move my marker out of the way. It's this one here. I'm going to go into this chain space, which is the one before the first of the 3 stems, and I'm going to join my yarn into there by making 1 chain and 1 double crochet into the same chain space. Then I'm going to work up the side of this leaf stem, so it's an idea to have that just slightly further over there towards the leaf stem, and just like you did on the clementine motif, you're going to use the remaining part of that foundation chain for your stitches, and you're going to work a slightly different repeat. You're starting with double crochet, so it's a double crochet into that one, it's a half treble into the next one, then it's a treble into the next one, treble into the next one. Oh, I've just split that. Treble into the next one. That noise is my stitch markers just rubbing on the table, and then a half treble into the next one. So I'm at the top of my leaf stem. I'm going to do 3 double crochet into that skipped chain at the top, 1, 2 and 3, and then I'm going to work back down the other side of that leaf. So I'm starting with a half treble into that first one, half treble, a treble, another treble
a half treble and a double, and that completes my first leaf. Then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that chain space, and that completes my first leaf. So once I'd finished the first leaf, the rounded leaf, I did 1 double crochet into the next chain space, then I did 5 chain and a double crochet into the next chain space, and then you're asked to work up the side of the next leaf stem. And this is where things can start to get a bit complicated, because you've got quite a lot going on in here, and you've got a picot, for example, here, and I'm about to start work on the top of this leaf. So what I thought I'd show you at this point is a little trick I've got for writing kind of a crochet shorthand, if you like, and it's a way of making patterns far simpler. I think it's really hard when you actually keep having to refer back to the written pattern. So I'm going to show you how I draw myself a little diagram at this point so that I can see what that repeat is. It just helps for when I'm doing the other side. So I'll show you that quickly now. So I'm going to show you how I do my crochet shorthand. If you've not read charts before, you don't know how to read a chart, this is a really good way of getting into charts. Reading charts does really make things so much quicker, but having a little shorthand is a really good little trick. So what we're going to do is I'm going to draw out what I would write in my notebook if I was a bit confused by a little bit of crochet. I'm going to do it with a big marker pen. Obviously if I do it in my notebook I'm not going to do it at this scale. But the first thing I'm going to do is just do a dash for each of the 5 stitches. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know there's 5 stitches along the side of the stem that we made in the blue yarn. And then there's a skipped chain that I'm just going to just do a little bobble for at the top there. There's a skipped chain at the top. Okay, so this represents the remaining side of the stitches on this side and the top of the stitches on this side and the skipped chain at the top there. And if I read the pattern through, it says to do 1 DC into the first stitch. So I write 1 DC, 1 half treble into the next stitch, and 1 treble into the next stitch. And if you want, you could do a little arrow so that you know those are going into 1 stitch. Then into the next stitch you're asked to work a treble, so it's 1 treble into that next stitch. Okay, and then at the top of that you're doing a picot, so I'm going to write the word picot there. And a picot looks like that, doesn't it? It's like a little chain ring. This is really, I'm doing this kind of almost like over the top in a way, but this is kind of, I'd make myself a little, something that represents the picot there. And then we're asked to do 3 chain and do a slip stitch back into this stitch here. So we know we've got to get from here down to here. So I'm going to do an arrow like that and write 3 chain just under that arrow. So I've got a double crochet, a half treble, a treble and a picot, a 3 chain to get me back into there, and at that point I've done a slip stitch. So I'm just going to write slip stitch there, and I'm going to do a slip stitch into the next stitch, and then I start working at the top here. Okay, so that's the shorthand for that little bit of crochet. It looks quite a lot when it's on that sort of scale, but if I was writing that in my little notebook that would take up a very small space, and it just gives me a visual representation of what I need to do when I work this part of the leaf. So I've drawn out the way that I would work this next part of my little shorthand, and I've done a slip stitch into that next stitch, and then if you look at my arrows you can see I've done 3 chain. This represents my 3 chain going up, and then over the next 2 stitches, which is this stitch and this stitch, skipping the chain at the top there, I've done a treble 2 together. That's my representation of the treble 2 together. Then I've done another picot, and then I've done 3 chain and come back down into the stitch at the other side. And you'll see, you can hopefully see if you understand my shorthand, which I hope you do, that I've missed that skipped chain at the top. So it's a slip stitch into the next stitch, 3 chain, treble 2 together, and that's represented by this kind of upside down V, a picot, and a 3 chain back in this direction, and a slip stitch into that last stitch. So that will make the little tip of the leaf and the picot at the top there. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to show you the next bit. So here is my crochet representation of what I wrote out in my shorthand. I did 3 chain, and then I did a treble 2 together over the same stitch and the next stitch on the other side of the stem, missing the chain at the top of the leaf, and I did treble 2 together. Then I did a picot, then I did 3 chain and did a slip stitch back into that same stitch. So now I'm going to use my shorthand to work this side of the remaining side of the leaf, and I don't feel the need to draw that out again. I know that I'm doing pretty much a mirror image of what I've written out here. The only difference is here in that instead of coming back into the slip stitch, I'm going to be coming out, so I've got to do 6 chain in order to make my first 3 chain and my picot. So I'm going to do 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to skip 3 and do a slip stitch, and that is now the equivalent of this 3 chain and a picot there. Then if I look at this, I can see I've got a treble into the same stitch. I've done my picot, so I'm working back this way. It's a treble into the same stitch, and then I can see I've got a treble into the next stitch, and then a half treble into the next stitch, and finally a double into the next stitch. And that means I've created, just move it out of the way, that means I've created my next leaf. And it's a little complicated one, but hopefully my shorthand has made that easier. So then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into the next chain space. I'm going to move that out the way. I'm going to do 5 chain and do 1 double crochet into the next chain space, and then I'm ready to work along my final leaf of the 3, and I'm going to do a mimic of this one, the rounded one. So this is my motif at more or less the halfway point of round 10. I've got a rounded leaf and a 5 chain space, then I've got a spear shaped leaf and a 5 chain space and another rounded leaf. And what I realised I didn't do is I didn't say that you needed to put a marker on the previous round at the end, at the top of that little stem. So I hope I didn't confuse you too much by not having that there. I've then done a 5 chain space after that last leaf and a 3 chain space and then another 5 chain space, and then I'm ready to start the next leaf. So here's my motif at the end of round 10. I've got 2 spear-like leaves opposite each other at the centre point, and then I've got 4 rounded leaves, and those all line up with the thin leaves that we previously made. What I've done is I've gone back and put my stitch markers in to those skipped stitches, skipped chain at the top of those leaf stems. So I've put my green markers there into those that I missed earlier, and I've got my 8 markers in on that round that was made using mint, and I'm going to use those on the next round, so all these will be taken out by the end of the next round, but these two remain in. So I'm going to show you the final round for this set of patterns, which will be round 11, and I'm going to be using caramel. So I'm starting this round by working behind one of the central leaves here, one of the spear-like leaves, and I'm going to find that marked stitch there that was marked way back on that mint round. I'm going to take the marker out of that stitch and join my caramel shade into that stitch there by working one. Oh, I've just caught the yarn. I've actually caught the mint yarn there, so let's just do that again. So one chain and one double crochet into the same stitch. So this is the one directly behind that spear-like leaf, and I've pushed the leaf forward so that it's not in the way. Then I'm going to do 7 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I'm going to do another double crochet into that same stitch. So I've got a little chain loop that's been made then behind that spear-like leaf there. Then I'm going to do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm looking for these 11 stitches that we made using the mint. Do you remember we filled up that chain space with 11 stitches? And I'm going to find the 6th stitch of those 11. So you'll need to find the first one. It might have got buried underneath your picot and all that went on over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there it is. And I'm going to do 3 double crochet into that stitch. So 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, so I've come from behind the leaf here and I've come to the front and picked up the mint yarn there and done 3 double crochet into the 6th stitch of the 11. Then I'm going to do 5 chain, 1, oh dear, I've gone all cat-handed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then push that next leaf forward, find that skipped stitch. Now you can either go into it while the marker's in there if you want to, or you can remove the marker first. I find sometimes doing it and then removing the marker is sort of safer. Now we're not making a 7 chain loop here, that's the only place we do that is behind these spear leaves. So then I'm going to do 5 chain, oh dear, 4, 5, and then I'm going to find the 6th stitch of these 11 again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, do 3 double crochet into that one, 1, 2, 3, and 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go to the back of the work, find that next marked stitch and do a double crochet into there. And I'm going to do that the whole way around the round. The only place that is different is when I meet this next spear-like leaf, I'm going to do 7 chain behind there to make another yarn loop at the back, a chain loop at the back. I've completed round 11 and taken out all the stitch markers apart from those left at the top of the leaf stems, and I've got 3 stitches into each of the number 6 of the 11 stitches made on the mint round, and 5 chain in between each of those, and a 1 DC at the back. So it's kind of coming and going, it's coming to the front then going back to the back, coming to the front going to the back, and pulling up that round, so it almost makes a star shape now, that mint round. And when you look at the back of the motif, I've not sewn that last end in because it's not easy to sew it in when there's just a chain. We've got the 5 chain spaces all the way round, but behind the 2 central spear-like leaves you've got a 7 chain loop. So just make sure you've got both of those in. I've done it before where I get to the end and realise I've lost one of them or didn't do one of them. Not lost, how can you lose a chain space? I didn't do one of them. So just make sure you've got those chain spaces because they're used later. What you're going to be asked to do later on is actually marry up this skipped chain at the top of your leaf with this chain space. So just make sure you've got everything that you need. So that's what it looks like at the front. You're doing really well with these Acanthus motifs. I hope that the video has made everything feel a little bit easier, and that maybe you'll have a little practice at your own shorthand. You can make up your little icons that you use for picos or slip stitches or whatever stitch you're doing. That's up to you. You make up your own little shorthand. But it does, I find it does make things a lot easier, and the more you do it, the more you'll get used to reading your own shorthand and then maybe reading some charts. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you back here in a couple of weeks' time when we work a couple more rows on the Acanthus motif and a brand new motif. Don't forget, you've got to make 8 of these. So that's it. I'll see you soon.